Thank you, sir. Vandana,
Yes, sir.
start now. You can start now.
Yeah, thank you, sir. A very good morning to USA and a happy evening to India. I am Vandana, a second year BCom student of Seshadripuram Evening College. Welcome to the 97th International Webinar of Seshadripuram Evening College. At the outset, I am very happy to inform you all that our Evening College is celebrating its Golden Jubilee year. On behalf of our college, we congratulate all the stakeholders. Today's webinar is fully hosted by the students of Seshadripuram Evening College. I request everyone to kindly pardon us in case of any mistakes. IQAC Initiative, Department of English, in association with College of Arts and Science, Emory University, Atlanta, Georgia, US, and Bangalore University English Teachers Association is organizing this international webinar on the topic, The Pleasure of Teaching Shakespeare, Chapter 16. I now request Spandana of third year BCom to welcome and introduce all the dignitaries to this international webinar. Over to you, Spandana.
Thank you, Vandana. A very good morning to USA and a happy evening to India. I take this opportunity to welcome you all for this 97th international webinar of our college. At the outset, I would like to thank all the office bearers of this great institution and welcome all of them. Now, I would like to introduce and welcome today's first theme speaker, Dr. Shaila T. Kavanagh ma'am, Professor, Director, Emory Women Writers Resource Project Editor, the Spencer Review Department of English, College of Arts and Science, Emory University. Shaila T. Kavanagh ma'am is Professor of English at Emory University and Director of the World Shakespeare Project, author of books on the works of Edmund Spenser and Lady Mary Wroth. She has written numerous articles on teaching and a wide range of topics related to Elizabethan literature, exhibition design, and culinary history. She is currently completing a book for Aden entitled Multisensory Shakespeare for Specialized Communities and deep into the research for a volume tentatively entitled Cooking Across the Canon. Ma'am, on behalf of Seshadripuram Evening College, I welcome you for this webinar.
Thank you very much. I'm absolutely delighted to be here, although I would love to be there in person. The last time I was in your city was in January of 2020. And you can imagine that that was one of the last places I went before lockdown. After January 2020, you're very welcome.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, I would like to... Yes, sir.
Continue, ma'am.
Now, I would like to introduce and welcome today's second theme speaker, Dr. Fayaz Ahmad Hilkal, sir, Assistant Professor, Local Head, Department of English, Rani Chennamma University, PG Center, Vijayapur, Karnataka. Sir is currently working as an Assistant Professor of English and Local Head, Rani Chennamma University, PG Center, Torvi, Vijayapur, Karnataka. He has published 21 research papers in national and international journals, contributed one chapter, published one book, and entitled Family and Society in Arthur Miller's Select Plays, have delivered several lectures, chaired sessions, delivered keynote address on both online and offline mode. Sir is BOE, BOS, and doctoral committee member of various state and central universities. Sir, on behalf of Seshadripuram Evening College, I welcome you for this webinar.
Thank you, Spandana.
Thank you, sir. It is my proud privilege to welcome Shri W.D. Ashok, sir, Honorary Trustee, Seshadripuram Educational Trust in his absence here. I would also like to welcome our beloved principal, Professor N.S. Satish, sir, who is a man of perfection and a guiding force for having organized 96 international webinars conducted so far. On behalf of our IKC department, I welcome you, sir. I welcome Dr. Tamaya R.B. sir, Academic Council Member, Bangalore University, and General Secretary, Bangalore University English Teachers Association. I welcome all the office bearers and trustees of Seshadripuram Educational Trust and all the principals of our sister institutions, other heads of the institutions, conveners, volunteers, and all the participants who have registered across the globe. I welcome Darapa Konnur sir, Program Coordinator, Naksudha R. ma'am, IQAC Coordinator, and finally, I welcome our own teaching and administrative staff to this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Spandana. May I now request today's first theme speaker, Dr. Shaila T. Kavanagh, ma'am, Professor, Director, Emory Women Writers Resource Project Editor, the Spencer Review Department of English, College of Arts and Science, Emory University, to enlighten us on the topic, Weight of Pain, Trauma, Informed Shakespeare. For the next 25 to 30 minutes, the floor is yours, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you very much for the invitation. I'm sure some of you are wondering when your overall topic is about pleasure, that I would propose a topic about weight of pain and trauma, but they actually do come together. And I hope that I will make that clear. I want to say at the beginning that I don't have slides, and the reason for that is that I'm working with a number of communities who cannot legally or ethically give consent to their photographs being included. And so I'm very careful to not violate that. What I'm talking about today comes from some of the research that I've done for my book, which, as was mentioned, is called Multisensory Shakespeare for Specialized Communities. The first half of the book is on Shakespeare for people with physical differences, intellectual differences, etc. So people with vision issues, deaf, blind audiences, people with learning differences, etc. The second part is what I'm going to be drawing from today, which is groups of people who come together and work on Shakespeare as part of their endeavor to come out of the periods of trauma that they have had. So the chapters there's one on military veterans, there's one on incarcerated and formerly incarcerated Shakespeareans, and there's one on youth who are either at risk, have been incarcerated, or who have experienced homelessness. And again, despite the trauma in the title, there is lots of pleasure. One of the things that I want to talk about, and I'll give you one example to begin with, is that people regularly ask the question, why Shakespeare? What is it about Shakespeare that is relevant for such audiences? And several before the pandemic, Bill Watson from a group called Feast of Crispian, which is named from Henry V. It's a veterans group, and he was visiting my university and was asked that question. And his answer was, he was talking about how typically in our normal life, we tend to minimize, or we often minimize what's going on. So that if somebody says, how are you today? That oftentimes people will say, I'm fine, and how are you? No matter what had happened. They don't say, well, I had a big fight with my spouse, and my dog bit me, and my kids won't talk to me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas in Shakespeare, when Lady Macbeth asks Macbeth, how are you? His response is, my mind is filled with scorpions. Now, most of us, hopefully none of us, have ever had our mind filled with scorpions. But you can imagine how painful that would be, how distracting that would be, that he's giving an more accurate account of what's going on in his life. And so that Shakespeare often facilitates that kind of endeavor. The first thing I'm going to talk about, because the groups that I'm looking at in my book are widely different. They're in multiple different countries, including in India, and I'll talk about that. But the one thing that they all have in common is that they all breathe. They may not all see, they may not hear, they may have limbs that they are missing, but they all breathe. And one of the prison programs in Detroit posted a message a few months ago that said, and this is a quote, "When I came into Shakespeare, it was just like a breath, a stress reliever, somewhere I could spend my energy in a positive way while having a good time and not getting into trouble. That's what I wanted to get out of it. And by heaven, I did." And this talks about one of the important aspects of this work and working with Shakespeare is that the breath is incredibly important. And breath, there's some famous vocal teachers, Kristen Linklater, for example, and Patsy Rodenberg, who have done a lot of work with the Royal Shakespeare Company and other Shakespeare groups, and they talk about breath. This is Rodenberg, a quote, "Many of our habits today are about non-communication. Perhaps we don't trust what we say or believe that others are listening. We're often frightened of committing to any powerful idea or passionate feeling. Our communication grows indirect, surrounded by an aura of studied casualness. We hesitate and mumble." She also goes on and talks about how in our life, what that does to our bodies. She says, "Our modern bodies tend to be held and tight jaws riddled with stress. We either fight the world vocally, pushing aggressively at it, or avoid committing ourselves to speech, underusing our voices. Both options reduce the range and enjoyment of the voice. Tension locks sound and words into the speaker. But we have to unlock sound in order to release every quality embedded in Shakespeare's language." There, where Shakespeare is, this is Linklater. "When words are mainly expressed in the head and the mouth, they convey cerebral meaning, so it's all in our heads. In order to transfer Shakespeare's full emotional, intellectual, and philosophical intent, words must connect with the whole human range of intellect, emotion, body, and voice. They must be allowed to rediscover old routes of appetite to bring back taste and texture to speaking, and to spark the animal response mechanisms which fire creative processes long buried under layers of civilized and rational behavior. Only the fullest access to the humanity of the speaker allows one to speak Shakespeare fully." And people go on and talk about that at some length. And this is one of the connecting parts of the different groups that I am speaking about today. One famous group in North America is Shakespeare Behind Bars. There is a documentary about that you can stream. I highly recommend it to you. It is a wonderful, wonderful documentary that talks about a Shakespeare group that was founded in a prison in Kentucky, which has been going strong for 25 years. One of the people who is in that documentary, Sammy Byron, spent 34 years in prison. He is now out of prison and he regularly comes and visits my classroom, and he's a big part of the documentary. He says that the learning how to breathe in his Shakespeare Behind Bars work changed his life, and that's one of the reasons why he can be out of prison. Since he left prison, again, after 35 years, he remarried the woman he had been married to when he was sent to prison. And at that point, he divorced her because he thought he may never get out of prison. So they got back together and remarried 35 years later, having had no contact in between. And both of them say that his voice is different now, that the man she was married to 35 years ago spoke differently than the man she is married to now. And he says that because that before he got involved in the Shakespeare world, he spoke very softly and he was afraid to raise his voice because of the horrible consequences that often followed yelling in his life. And he talks about his abusive childhood and talks about being a broken child who wanted to speak but was afraid to speak. But that when he began working on Shakespeare, it taught him to open up his throat, to speak through his body. And after a lifetime of living in his head, he learned to take in more oxygen and increased his ability to project. And he said that when he first started this work, he often would hurt his throat, but that doing the Shakespeare work enabled him to reach more parts of his body and to express things in ways that he couldn't do before. And certainly in his job, when he's speaking to my students, when he's in a social situation, that part is really evident. So breath is important for a lot of these groups and for a lot of people, and it's what Shakespeare brings out, because Shakespeare requires us to really speak the words that are in the plays rather than suppressing them. So there's also not only breath work that's important, but physical work is important. And there are at least two Shakespeare practitioners that I work with closely who integrate yoga extensively in their Shakespeare work with prisoners. One of these is Hulugappa Kadamani, who's in Mysore. And if you ever have a chance to see his group from the prison perform, I highly recommend it. They are really spectacular. And there's also Scott Jackson, who started the Shakespeare in Prison Network in North America. But since yoga focuses on breath and on mindfulness and on attention to the integration of body and spirit, it develops practices associated with addressing trauma, as well as goals sought through Shakespeare programs. Claire Szabo Casella has written a book about Shakespeare and yoga. And this is one of the things she says to explain that. Thanks to my yoga practice, I better comprehend the crucial importance of Shakespeare's core themes and spiritual wisdom, especially his recurring reminder on the integrity of self. She goes on and talks about how every Shakespeare play, like every yoga practice, is an open-ended opportunity to encounter the story of our life just as a play unfolding. The ego-directed self, with its tendency for theatricality and drama, makes being true to the higher self noble work, just the opposite of self-serving. Because when we're true to who we really are, we act with a heightened awareness of our every thought, word, and action, and their effects on our lives and others, our interconnectedness. So there are many, many plays that deal with traumatic episodes that are similar to many of the things that brought people into incarceration, whether it's revenge or murder or envy or struggles for power, etc. If you're looking at Hamlet, King Lear, Romeo and Juliet, even the comedies, Twelfth Night, As You Like It, Much Ado About Nothing, and the history plays, you get lots of these intersections between Shakespeare, yoga, and breath. And another quote about that is Shakespeare and yoga both offer benefits to even the absolute beginner on the very first encounter. Our bodies and minds are hardwired to benefit from all forms of yoga. And this is something that Katamani does regularly with the Mysore community. There's another group, Decrute, which works with veterans, and they talk about how, it's certainly in the United States, that there's a lot of effort that goes into recruiting soldiers into the military, and that they're taught to be angry, they're taught to kill, they're taught to be on guard, but that when they leave the army, they are never taught, they are never decruited. So they're not prepared to go back into their communities. And Stefan Wolfert, who runs this group, says, in English, we speak in iambic pentameter. The thought continues, but we grab a breath. I found that form of verse not only provided language for an experience that even if I had the language to articulate it, I re-experience it. So he found that if people talk about their own experiences, they often go back into being traumatized. But if they're talking about traumatic experiences in a play, and they have to breathe in order to share that story, and it ends up allowing, it says the form helped me breathe and carry me through the entire story to get to the end and feel lighter by sharing it. He also says one of the things that actually a number of people say is that people, generally you hear, well, Shakespeare's language is hard. And it often is hard. But what Wolfert and others say is that by grappling with that, it throws you off balance, and you can't fall back on your normal defense mechanisms. And so if you're trying to deal with language that's unfamiliar with you, you have to learn a lot of things again. And as he said, they just leap into Shakespeare and they go in through breath. They breathe, they say a line, and then they say, what do you think it means? And the person will often say, I don't know. And they say, great, breathe in and speak the line. And it's keeping going forward, and they're getting space to share things that they already know, but that they can't normally share. So one of the programs, for example, in this realm is called Shakespeare in the Courts. And this started when a judge in Massachusetts contacted Shakespeare and Company in Western Massachusetts. And he wanted youth to be involved in learning Shakespeare. And so they started a program where the students, instead of being sent to jail, are sent to rehearsals. And so they're performing Shakespeare instead of serving time in jail. And Kevin Coleman, who runs the program, says most of the people, when they're there, they'd rather be anywhere else. They're not interested in Shakespeare. They don't want to have anything to do with it. But they realize that the stakes are high, that if they succeed in this program, if they show up, if they show respect, if they participate, that they will finish their probation early. And if they don't, they'll go to jail. So they take baby steps, but they eventually learn new things. They listen to each other. They risk saying things that are more real than what they normally say. And it helps the students manage their anger. They often fall in love with Shakespeare, but they also fall in love with what's awakening within themselves. So there are a number of other programs. One of the ones, and I don't know exactly what the Indian equivalent of this would be, but Shakespeare Behind Bars has started a program with the juvenile justice system. And what they are doing, that they wanted to spend a year rewriting Hamlet, but the participants wanted to have more connection with their own lives. And Devon Glover, who's known as the Sonnet Man, is a talented performer, and he's very, very good at bringing out correspondences between Shakespeare, rap, and hip hop. And that's the direction that they took. I don't know how many of you know this about rap and hip hop, but there's a lot of Shakespearean connections. Tupac, for example, has an entire book of his compositions, his musical compositions that came directly from Shakespeare, and he regularly took Shakespeare with him. A lot of modern performers do that. And so, and there's also a lot of work being done on how hip hop and rap can be therapeutic. And the students find that revenge tales, like the ones in Hamlet, are familiar to them because such revenge narratives lie at the heart of what sent them into prison. The play's themes of jealousy, revenge, and loyalty also resonate with them. And they believe that these characters and situations align well with the experience of modern life. They also find Shakespearean resonances in Eminem and J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, Jay-Z, Wu-Tang Clan, and other performers that are giving messages that they can relate to. And as Devon Glover says to Shakespeare, says about Shakespeare, Shakespeare's work is so pervasive that you know Shakespeare even if you don't know that you know Shakespeare. So they are looking at the ways that Shakespeare and modern musical forms can help people come to a better understanding of their own feelings, of their own experiences, and ways that they can communicate through other people's words that they would not communicate through their own words. Again, the same thing happens working with children who are experiencing homelessness. And a lot of those children, of course, are living in very unsettled situations, and they don't have necessarily good, good schooling situations and such. But again, there are lots of experiences in Shakespeare that resonate. For example, if you think about Midsummer Night's Dream, it begins with the father demanding that his daughter marry somebody that he wants her to marry, not who she wants to marry. Well, obviously, any child, whether that child is living with the family in a home or is homeless, they know that there are conflicts between parents and children, and that these often need thoughtful ways to respond. And the children in these environments do scenes from Shakespeare, they do art from Shakespeare, they love having costumes from Shakespeare. And many of these groups also use art, so that art and music, Sankalpa in Mysore, for example, some of their performers provide the music for their plays. Some of them create settings or backdrops or costuming. They do a lot of work with clay, which is a very tactile sense that can help. And it also, one of the things, and this has come up in various contexts, but the one in Mysore I think is really lovely. They perform, and a group in Kolkata that Alakanandra Roy, who you may be familiar with, she has a group in Kolkata and he has a group in Mysore, and they each take their groups to various places around the country. And frequently people are astonished. There was at one point, they were in a hill village and there was a shrine at the top of the hill that people wanted to see. And so they all ran up there. And when they came back for the performance, the journalists were shocked. They said, why did you come back? You didn't have anybody following you. You could have run away. And they said, well, then who would have played my part? I had to come back. I had a part to play. With the group in Calcutta, when the same question was asked once, they said, if I ran away, I would have to be running for the rest of my life. And I am now living in a community with people who care about me. They care about my family. While I am in prison, they are helping make sure that my family, my children are being educated. They are helping me. They are supporting me. I would rather be here with you doing Shakespeare. The group in Kolkata also, if they're performing in these groups, they regularly get home leave from the prison where they can go home for a couple of days and be with their families and then return to the prison. So there are, as I said at the beginning, there are lots of ways in which there is pleasure, there is joy, that Shakespeare opens up possibilities, that Shakespeare opens up ideas. The language, the iambic pentameter, that on the one hand seems so difficult, can be revelatory. I was talking to a company earlier today, and they have a young woman in their company who is frequently what they said, she's tongue-tied. It's hard for her to speak, whether it's on stage or just in a small group, it's hard for her to speak. But because Shakespeare is an iambic pentameter, and that follows the human heartbeat, when she learns Shakespeare, she gets up and presents it flawlessly. So even though a lot of these groups began in places of trauma, pleasure and joy result, and many of them remain in these programs even after they leave the situation that they were in, and they often use Shakespeare to guide them in their lives. As one person said, quoting from Hamlet, I knew I shouldn't be here, and so I went home, because as it says in Hamlet, to thine own self be true. Thank you very much. I enjoy being here with you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your insightful theme address. May I now request today's second theme speaker, Dr. Fayaz Ahmed H. Ilkal Sir, Assistant Professor, Local Head, Department of English, Rani Channamma University, PG Center, Vijaypura, Karnataka, to enlighten us on the topic, Is Destiny Character or Character Destiny? A discourse on Shakespeare's select tragedies. For the next 25 to 30 minutes, the floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. So my screen is visible to you all?
Yes, sir.
Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
But make it full screen, sir.
Yeah, recently I have purchased this laptop. I am not sure about how to use this. Yeah. No?
It's okay, sir. You can continue. Yes, sir. Now it has been.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Respected dignitaries, the guest of honor, Sri P.C. Narayan, sir, and then the trustee of Sheshadripuram Educational Trust, Sri W.D. Ashok, sir, and then the program coordinator, Dharepa Kundu, sir, and the other dignitaries, as well as the first theme speaker, Dr. Sheila, ma'am. It's really a pleasure to teach and speak about William Shakespeare. I hope I'm audible, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So the topic which I have chosen is destiny a character or character is destiny? A discourse on Shakespeare's select tragedies. So this talk basically concerns itself with how and what the concepts of character and fate or destiny means in William Shakespeare's plays. The argument begins with Heraclitus' statement that character is destiny. It is a quote attributed to the Greek philosopher Heraclitus. This quote implies the destiny or fate is not predetermined, it is outside force, which no one has control over it, but that one's future or destiny is determined by his own inner character. So this quote is also sometimes incorrectly attributed to 19th century English author George Eliot, who quoted the phrase in her 1860 novel, The Mill on the Floss. Here I will be discussing about fate or destiny, how it plays a major role in shaping out the character and his fate. I wish to prove that particular values emphasized by the authors set forth the protagonists of the works as role models of character. Their resultant fates were directly caused by their particular characters. The central idea is the rule of karma. It can be interpreted in this way as virtue rewarded and vices punished. And Shakespeare strongly believes in this concept that character is destiny. In order to put forth my discussion about this, I have chosen 4 tragedies. First one is Hamlet, and then Othello, Macbeth, and King Lear. The major issue or issues in the characters of Hamlet and Macbeth, Othello, and King Lear is Hamlet's indecisiveness, to be or not to be. And then Macbeth's obsession with power, Othello's jealousy, and King Lear's pride and unjust. So all these things can be put under karma. What do you sow, you reap. So you can see that this has been the central idea in almost all the Shakespearean tragedies. This has been the common characteristic feature. He believes in fate. Shakespeare believes in fate, and that element considers the man responsible for his prosperity as well as fall or decay. In his tragedies, one finds that he believes in character is destiny. That is, the character himself is responsible for his doom, which we call tragic flaw or fatal flaw. The very small mistake can change the whole life of the protagonist and lead him to decay. Here are some points which will help us to understand how character plays a vital role in forming his own destiny. It may be fate or luck. So it's very essential for us to understand what is destiny. So everyone have their own concept and idea about destiny. And for many people, it is how they live their lives. They believe that everyone's life has its own destiny or course. In other words, our destiny is our fate. It could either be good thing or bad thing. And for most people, it has already been decided by a supreme being or God. Certain things are not in our control. So at that time, what do? We simply surrender. We keep on giving futile attempts. And some of them, they believe that one can decide his or her own destiny. A person just has to know how to control it and become a master of it. As Swami Vivekananda has said, one should not be master of his slave of his senses, but he should be master of his senses. Here, I personally believe partially in both, that one can control his or her own destiny by the deeds he or she do. On the same way, God also decides one's destiny. But if we just live our life expecting that everything will be controlled by God, I'm sorry, that is wrong. Nothing in life is predestined, as in the people we meet, the jobs we get, or the person we marry. There are so many examples which we can take up from our day-to-day life. So the notion of destiny is just an excuse that people use for the misfortune or fortunes. If it is misfortune, we put it on fate. If it is fortune, we claim it that it is our hard work, isn't it? So each action, each desire, each thought produces its result with unfailing certainty. So a tragic flaw is a personality that leads to the downfall. It can be also a wrong action performed by the protagonist that results in his own ruin, which also makes a tragedy. If he doesn't commit any error, then it is not a tragedy. We find such tragic flaws in Shakespeare's great tragic heroes, which are the reasons of their decay or death. Therefore, the calamity does not simply happen. They are direct and inevitable consequences of the hero's own deeds, which issue out of character. There is something inevitable in every tragedy of Shakespeare. And this element of supernatural is always placed in the closest relation with character. It plays a very important dominant role in almost all of the Shakespearean tragedies. It gives a confirmation as a distinct form to inward movements already present and exerting an influence. In Shakespearean tragedies, the element of fate or destiny is introduced by other modes of supernatural elements also. It is good to say the doctrine of character is destiny, in place of the theory of character is destiny. So there are some factors along with the protagonist's characteristic or personal characters traits, which are the causes of hero's tragedy, death, or sufferings. For instance, the ghost in Macbeth and Hamlet, the many references to the divine in King Lear, all of the supernatural powers operating on the actions of man. Fate appears above the stage like an invisible actor, playing a principal part, operating, deceiving, betraying, and watching the blundering actions of the miserable hero. I would like to quote A.C. Bradley here. I quote, "His fate affects the welfare of a whole nation or empire. And when he falls suddenly from the height of earthly greatness to the dust, his fall produces a sense of contrast, of the powerlessness of man and the omnipotence, perhaps the caprice of fortune or fate, which no tale or private life can possibly rival." I unquote. So the tragic story is primarily concerned with one person, that is the protagonist of the tragedy. It includes the death of hero. The sufferings are exceptional and also contrasted with previous glory and happiness. The calamity of tragedy does not simply happen. They proceed mainly from actions of men. The catastrophe follows inevitably from the deeds of men, and that the source of these deeds is character himself. Hence, the tragic flaws of Shakespeare's heroes and the reason of their sufferings. The first tragic flaw of Hamlet I'll be discussing over here. In his tragedy, Hamlet, the character of Hamlet is a very interesting topic for me also, since I came across this text. The character of Hamlet has come to symbolize the person whose thoughtful nature is an obstacle to quick and decisive action. Character is destiny means that plot should draw out of the characters themselves. The fact that Hamlet spares the king when he finds him praying is from its effect on the hero's fortune of the great moment, but the cause of the fact which lies within Hamlet is described as thoughtful as well as self-doubting and not certain of his own rightness. He is intelligent, of course he is learned. His soliloquies or soliloquies are the most important vehicle for the expression of his personality. So the audience can peep into his mind as to what is going on in his mind. That may also lead to his indecisiveness. This is again where he thinks of karma. He wants him to be punished, not to be rewarded. He wants to see his uncle Claudius into hell, not in heaven, especially when he's praying. He doesn't want to kill him. Hamlet is an outstanding example of revenge play. It is a tragedy in which the attainment of justice entails the avenging hero's death. It is in the first scene of Act 3 that Hamlet speaks a soliloquy that has become a verbal emblem for Shakespearean tragedy. I quote from Hamlet, page number 124. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them, to die, to sleep, I unquote. So here, Hamlet suffers from indecision. That was his flaw. He cannot take a firm decision, right or wrong, at the moment of killing Claudius. So you will find number of examples, number of instances where he could act, but he went on wailing the time, spending the time to be or not to be. So this, he realized the action of taking revenge of his father's murder by Claudius, even though he knows who is the killer. And that brings his downfall, leading to death in the fencing match. In this way, procrastination is Hamlet's tragic flaw. I move on to next tragedy of William Shakespeare, that is Othello. He is the only responsible of his downfall. You cannot blame other characters. One of the main factors which push Othello to his death is his jealousy. Iago is playing with Othello about an affair between Desdemona and Cassio. Iago is just telling him that they are together and uses small details to prove Othello it really happened. Even with this lack of evidence, Othello chooses to believe Iago because he is thinking only about what Desdemona possibly did to him. He is looking for a way to obtain revenge more than to find out the truth. The only proof Othello thinks he has the handkerchief he believes Desdemona gave to Cassio. He is ready to kill his wife by pure jealousy. This was the reason for his tragedy. Othello was credulous. This was his mistake or tragic flaw that leads him to his tragedy or death. Iago says, I quote him, "Oh, be aware, my lord, of jealousy. It is the green-eyed monster which doth mock the meat it feeds on." I unquote. Excuse me. The ironic thing about Iago's advice to Othello is its soundness. He is one of the Shakespeare's many characters who gives some sound advice, yet goes against it. Not only does Iago put Othello to jealousy, he himself is jealous and resentful of the success of others. Calling jealousy a green-eyed monster is a metaphor full of imagery. Picture a green-eyed monster gnawing your spleen as it calls your names. That's jealousy. I move on to the next tragedy, that is Macbeth. And it has been one of the four best tragedies written by William Shakespeare. In Macbeth, Shakespeare teaches moral lesson. Ambition is good when it aspires for the spiritual and the eternal. But over ambition directed towards the death or decay. Macbeth's tragic flaw is his vaulting ambition for power. He plans to kill Duncan, his king. Macbeth admits to the one thing that drives him forward. I quote, "I have no power to prick the size of my intent, but only vaulting ambition," I unquote. Shakespeare represents abnormal conditions of his mind. For example, hallucinations. In Hamlet, it was soliloquies. Here it is hallucinations, and deeds issuing from these are expressive of character. Macbeth did not murder Duncan because he saw a dagger in the air. He saw the dagger because he was to murder Duncan. Macbeth thinks that to gain a crown, he would jump the life to come and finds that the crown has brought him all the horrors of that life. Everything in this tragic world, man's thought translated into act, is transformed into the opposite of itself. His act becomes a monstrous flood which spreads over a kingdom. Lady Macbeth receives a letter from her husband telling her of the prophetic words of three witches that he will become king. When the chance comes to kill King Duncan as he sleeps, Lady Macbeth urges Macbeth to murder the king, and the deed is done. Here are the very significant lines by Lady Macbeth to her husband Macbeth. I quote, and it is the most quoted quotation of William Shakespeare's tragedies. I quote, "All the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand," I unquote. The lines teaches us that whatever we have done, we have to pay for it. According to me, or I can, in simple words, I can say our deed decides our destiny. Now, I move on to the last tragedy, that is King Lear and his tragic flaw. Tragic hero must have three qualities. The first is that they must have power. King Lear has the highest rank of any leader. He is a king of Britain. The second is they must have a tragic flaw, and King Lear has several of those. The third, they must experience a downfall. Lear's realization of his mistakes is more than a downfall. So here, King Lear's flaws are his arrogance, his ignorance. He is unjust to his daughter Cordelia, that means his misjudgments. Lear, the old king of Britain, wants to retire and divide his kingdom among his three daughters, Gondril, Regan, and Cordelia, to find out which of them he would leave his kingdom in succession to. He asks each of them to describe how much they love him, blinded by the elder daughter's flatteries. Lear does not see that Cordelia, his youngest daughter, is the only one who loves him really. As she answered, I quote, I cannot heave my heart in my mouth. I love your majesty. According to my bond, no more, no less. Unquote. Furious at Cordelia's answer, he banishes her. The protagonist's wrong decision is the cause of his downfall. The following development of the play shows how Lear slowly loses his followers, his authority, and all material goods. His mental degeneration ends up in madness, and all his ideas and values break into pieces. At last, King Lear is wandering all around, and after Lear's reunion with Cordelia, the whole action urges to the climax. To conclude, I'd like to say, through the above evidences, that all the four great Shakespearean tragedies give the moral lesson. To some extent, critics and readers agree with the principle that character is destiny. In Othello, he shows that jealousy is sin, and when carried out to an extreme, it results in crime and tragedy. In Macbeth, he teaches a lesson that ambition is good, but over-ambition directed towards the death or decay. Hamlet's character teaches that don't be over-thoughtful and be confident. And then in King Lear, dramatist attacks the sin of ingratitude. Some feelings, emotions cannot be able to explain in words. It can be felt. Shakespearean tragedies ultimately leave two kinds of feelings: feeling of awe and feeling of sympathy. We feel awe at the fall of the great hero, while the feeling of sympathy is evoked in a way in which the hero meets his end, whether by his destiny or by his own mistakes or flaws. Macbeth is more relevant to today's society due to prevalence of ambition in everyday life. It can be seen everywhere, in schools, in politics, and especially in business. Everyone wants power. It is human nature to want to rise to the top. On the whole, I believe partially in this principal character is destiny, because the Almighty has the power to control our life. In this way, whatever we get, either good or bad, that is firstly because of our doings and then because of destiny. Both play an essential part in the formation of one's life. With this, I conclude my talk. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to express my thoughts on this topic. Over to you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your insightful theme address. Now the floor is open for the interaction. We will take a few questions which we have received from the chat box and registration form. I request Vivekananda, sir, Assistant Professor, Department of English, to moderate the interaction session. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, Dr. Kavanagh, ma'am. Good evening, Dr. Ahmed Itkal, sir. The first question is for Dr. Kavanagh, ma'am. May I put forward the question to you, ma'am?
Oh, yes, please.
When you talk about the importance of breathing, what differentiates mere shouting from breathing Shakespearean lines, ma'am?
That's a very good question. And I think that if for people who do sports or who sing or who act, they learn how to breathe from a much deeper part of their body, whereas yelling comes from higher up. And certainly one of the things Sammy Byron talked about a lot was that until he learned how to breathe as an actor, if he would yell, he'd hurt his throat. Whereas now he can yell as an actor and his throat is fine. And so it's using more of the body.
Is the growling done by the metal singers a part of this breathing, ma'am?
Is the which? I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Growling, ma'am.
Growling? It can be. I mean, there's a lot of work written about breath in general and breath as an actor. And it's less an idea of what sounds you're producing and more of where they're coming from in your body and how aware you are of your breath as you're making sounds.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your answer, ma'am.
Thank you.
The next question is for Dr. Ahmed Ilkal, sir. May I put forward the question to you, sir?
Yes, please, sir. Kindly type it on the chat box, sir, please.
Yes, sir. I'll first speak out the question, sir. Then I'll type it in the chat box. By studying Shakespeare,
Yes, yes.
can one realize one's tragic flaws and avoid one's tragic destiny before it unfolds?
As as I told you, that Shakespeare's tragedies or plays, they give us moral lessons. And certain things which are not in our limit, in our control, it goes out of our control. And sometimes the character's mistake itself causes his downfall. So it's very difficult as to which is right and which is wrong.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
So if you have any, you can also input your ideas also.
I think one's ego doesn't let one's tragic flaws to come forward before it unfolds. This is what I felt. Yes, sir.
See, as I have taken four tragedies, all the four tragedies deal with different aspects of life, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I hope I have cleared your doubt.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Vandana?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, respected speakers, for answering the questions of the participants. A small announcement before vote of thanks. We will now send the feedback form link in the chat box as well as to your registered mail. Kindly fill the same and send back for auto-generated e-certificates. The e-certificates will reach you immediately. I now request Dr. Tamaya Sir, Academic Council Member, Bangalore University, to propose vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Santosh sir, give co-host to Tamaya sir.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Oh,
Tamaya sir,
thank you,
you can
Professor.
unmute, sir.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
A very good morning. Since it's an international conference and people have joined from the abroad, so I have used deliberately good morning. Of course, good evening, India. So, Honorable President of the session and theme speakers of the today's session, Professor Kavnag and Dr. Fayaz, distinguished guests of the today seminar, international seminar, respected teachers, special invitees, teachers and friends. Success stories have never been easy. They are made of gift, determination, perseverance, hard work, and dedication. Today's session is a revelation of one among many such success stories. We hope to continue with more in the near future. I deem it my honor to be a part of this academic program and series of, if I'm not wrong, one of my friends have mentioned that it is a 97th conference. As I said, whatever the adjectives I've used, the determination, perseverance, hard work, dedication, entire thing goes to Seshadripuram Evening College, Professor Satish Sir, principal, and his team. So deserve the great applaud for this particular hard work. So it's my privilege to propose vote of thanks on this special occasion. I find words aren't sufficient or enough to thank our beloved, team speaker of the today's session, Professor Kavnal, and Professor Fayaz, Dr. Fayaz sir, and your, session was outstanding, and it's been encouraging to do so many activities in the academic arena, and definitely we continue to have the collaboration with the excellence expertise we want in near future also. I'm deeply grateful to you for your valuable time sparing with us to enlighten us on this particular occasion. Thank you so much, both the speakers. And I also thank our, president of Seshadripuram Education Society and Governing Council Chairman. And special thanks goes to, our beloved principal sir and my beloved friend Darepa Kannur, who is also a part of Bangalore University English Teachers Association. Our association is always collaboration we are giving, but entire hard work as designated to the organizers. They have done a wonderful job. Student volunteers right from the beginning to till today's session, they have rendered their service. So the service was outstanding. So I deeply, enjoyed thoroughly with having this academic collaboration with such a reputed institution in Bangalore city. Thank you once again. Thank you all the people who have supported to organize this program directly or indirectly. Thank you once again. Jai Hind, Jai Karnataka Mate.
Thank you, sir. Once again, thank you one and all. Principal sir, can we conclude the webinar?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. It was very nice. Thank you, ma'am. It's very informative, ma'am.
Very
Thank
nice
you.
to be here. Thank you.
Tamaya sir,
Fayaz sir, thank you,
thank you
sir.
very much.
Thank you so
Yes,
much,
sir.
ma'am.
Thank
Thank you,
you
sir.
for your constant support.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you to
Amaya
the
sir, thank you,
organizers
sir.
for giving an opportunity. Yeah, thank
Sir,
you,
it's all
sir.
yours. The credit goes to you, and you kudos. You deserve it. Wonderful
Entire
job.
teamwork, sir.
Wonderful
Actually.
job.
That's your humbleness, sir.
Greatness, sir. Thank
So
you.
see, looking forward to see you in Flesh and Blood.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. We are concluding the
Bye.
session, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, please.
Santosh sir, stop recording and stop FB Live.